and welcome to Banking Frontiers. We have always been bringing you some of the leading luminaries in the world of banking, technology, insurance, and security. And today we are going to have an insight into the area of DPDP or the Privacy Act in India, how the security companies, how the companies into the area of information risk are viewing this as a interesting opportunity for the banking and financial sector. What are the implications of the DPDP Act coming in, and where the bankers are trying to have their footprint into this area? And with me today, the luminary who is joining us is Sanjay Katkar, who has been into the area of security for decades with the famous brand of Quick Heal, which is a household brand in retail security. And of course, they have got Securite, which is for enterprise security, with which they work with the enterprise and the banking and financial sector. Sanjay, welcome to Banking Frontiers Live.
Thank you, Babu.
So, Sanjay, we have all heard about the Privacy Act, the DPDP Act. With the help of AI today, it is becoming more and more relevant because the organizational data is prone to more and more leakage and pilferage, especially with AI coming into picture. From your perspective, when you are working with the banks and financial institutions, what are some of the key challenges that the bankers have been facing today when it comes to implementing their DPDP acts, and where do they find stumbling blocks?
It's a very real concern, and it's a very good question, I must say. Even though the law is quite elaborate in more details, we feel that they've come out with a much bigger and much better framework. But if you look at the technological side, and especially when we are talking about banks, implementing DPDP in banking sector, it's not going to be straightforward at all. Like mainly because banks deal with like massive volumes of highly sensitive personal and financial data and systems, I'll say, or legacy systems or multiple applications and partner ecosystem. Now if I have to list certain things, I can say legacy framework. Here I am talking about like banks run multiple generation of technology. I have like when we are interacting with banks, we realize they are having XYZ system for gateway processing, they have something for ATMs, so core banking systems, CRM, or even loan origination or mobile apps, third party APIs. All these are like modules, but at the same time many times they are, certain modules are quite old, classical, and then there are certain things which are new generation, so many of which were never designed with privacy by design in mind, if you see. So integrating DPDP requirements like consent tracking or purpose limitation or maybe data deletion also, like across these fragmented systems, is going to be technically complex for banks. Even though government says give 2 years for complying, but I really feel it's going to take much longer time than that. Actually, if you see even consent management for banks is collecting data for dozens of purposes. Like they collect for a lot of different things like regulatory purposes, risk management related thing, or analyzing, or even marketing. Now, under DPDP, every piece of this data must be linked to certain specific and lawful purpose, and like consent must be granular, and which is again they will have to maintain those things in granular level, mapping all these existing data across different systems, and then building system that can easily give user the consent related chart is going to be very challenging, and that's what we have while interacting we have realized. And the third aspect I'll say is like third party ecosystem, which is widely used by banks when banks today operate with like large fintech ecosystem, payment gateways, or loan aggregators, or outsource partner for certain analytical data, or even providing reporting. Many times banks are using third party, so even if data is handled by third party, the responsibility still lies with the bank. So law clearly says that third parties, even though if you share data with third parties, the responsibility of the data will lie with the data owner. So the responsibility still lies with the bank, and ensuring that all these partners follow the same privacy and security standards is what banks will need to be like making sure, and with proper contracts, or it will imply changes in the contracts or even legal documents, and making sure these data handling related protocols and clauses are well drafted, again will need like major governance and coordination efforts here. So that's where I see working with third parties is becoming going to become complex, and it's going to take some time. Along with that, what we have realized is law is having one of the aspect is like only retained data that is needed. Now here, banks also have to deal with the retention and deletion related thing. So this is another tough one. I'll say banks have habit of like keeping data at multiple areas, and then just in case often the years beyond that, what's happened like DPDP will force data minimization, but at the same time retaining data only for as long as necessary is law is saying. But at the same time, banks have systems that are configured to keep the archives and everything for longer period.
So, Sanjay, thanks for that interesting information about the banks are facing challenges, especially when it comes to implementing the DPDP Act. Now, like we have seen in GDPR, we have a lot of companies which are helping organizations in getting into the grounds up implementation, like we do in security. So, in the DPDP Act, how can organizations, what kind of solutions or ideas are coming out for banks and financial institutions to implement this DPDP Act from grounds up rather than doing a piecemeal kind of approach?
Yeah, in fact, it's a very good question, and that's the very thing that we faced when we started talking about DPDP compliance implementation related things, as we were discussing with banks a lot. But then what we realized, even though it will be, it's an ideal scenario to have design systems from the grounds up, like with privacy built in from the grounds up, what we often called as privacy by design. But what we have also realized now, for means after so many of discussions, that new age fintechs or digital only banks which are newer ones, like very much possible there, because they are really building up a lot of systems from grounds up, and then this is the right time. In fact, many of them have already started with privacy by design almost two years back, when they started seeing the law going to become very soon a very reality. But for most of the traditional banks which are sitting on, like as I really earlier said, decades of legacy infrastructure, that's going to be a very big huge challenge. What That's what we realize, like core banking systems or CRM or loan origination platforms, all of these are like never built with privacy controls or consent related tracking or even data retention. So now rebuilding everything from scratch, that's going to be like I'll say very unrealistic. But at the same time, we as a designer, we coming from cybersecurity background, we always wanted to have it privacy by design. But the current approach we are forced to take by having a solution that fits with and integrates well with the existing systems, then eventually it is kind of patchwork according to me. But the thing is, we cannot change everything overnight, and that's where it's like feasibility wise it's difficult. But at the same time, we are suggesting hybrid approach to a lot. So herein I'll say new systems, whenever there is a new module, a new system designing happening, or even a mobile app being redesigned, there privacy by design is being forced, and making sure that the right APIs are being opened for having the compliance related changes. But then for existing systems, there will be layers. Privacy enhancing technologies will be in the form of layers, data discovery tools, or consent management modules, which will be an addition and a separate module on top of what already they have. So essentially, transition is going to be, I'll say, phase wise or strategically planned. Certain modules will be over the existing modules, and then a newer design where the newer operating system handsets, the goal should be like move towards privacy by design. So that's the approach we are discussing actually.
Interesting. Now, with the AI related tools coming so much into picture, people using AI, agentic AI in a big
Mhm.
way. Security is implementing agentic AI, or
Mhm.
processes are reinventing themselves using agentic AI. Ultimately, implementation of AI essentially means the risk of data pilferage at the source.
Mhm.
Right. Now, how are organizations really using AI effectively to also make sure that there is a containment of pilferage of data using AI? What are the kind of things that are coming into picture in the technology space?
Yeah, and means it's again one very very timely question, I'll say, because we ourselves are also having a quite a good look at all the AI based agents that are getting released, newer versions, and the algorithms they are getting used. And if I have to talk from the perspective of banking also, especially with banks now integrating AI across everything from like credit score to fraud detection to chatbots, all this is like already happening. DPDP is coming in picture. Everybody think in these lines is like people are going to use AI and very essential for the things, but AI is transforming how banks operate, but it helps automating decisions or maybe improving customer experiences, but it is also bringing a new layer of data privacy and ethical risk to the whole ecosystem, because especially when we look at it through the DPDP lens, data misuse or over collection of data, it's something that is unavoidable if you are using AI agents. That like conflicts like directly DPDP principles are going to conflict with the kind of prompt related engineering is needed for AI. So that's where we are pointing or maybe jotting down certain things where all it will be clashing with the law as a framework. But at the same time, if AI models are trained based on the data which is like incomplete, it's again going to be a challenge. So it's going to be, I'll say, unfair or unfair for banks if they are not allowed to use data for training, I mean, the right data for training the things. But at the same time, the effectiveness of AI is only dependent on how well you train the algorithms, and that is where the challenge is being right now put on the table from both the sides actually. So many times like AI systems, especially deep learning models, operate like black boxes, but on the back end somewhere we have to provide them the data to train to the level where they can perform to the best of the capacity of that algorithm. And the data sanitization or data related bifurcation is being discussed, and you rightly said this has really made the whole ecosystem more complex, and now the banks are really working towards how they stop usage of AI until there are right guardrails and right processes implemented, either to use data in the form of encryption or making sure use the right AI modules or agents which are giving you data related compliances inbuilt into the AI models, which are like very few currently and hardly any. And because AI agent suppliers or agent providers are also now working on these things, these are the newer requirements that are being raised by the banks, not only banks but those who are working with the sensitive data of the customers actually. So this is going to be a very big challenge, and it's right now, I'll say, in the discussion where very few people are right now able to fix this actually.
Superb. Now, just coming back to how DPDP is can be used as a trust accelerator or as a business accelerator. See, ultimately, when you give customer the advantage of all these compliances, you generally get in a lot more trust from the customer.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
how is
Hmm.
implementation of each of these technologies bringing in a lot more trust to the customer, according to you?
The whole purpose of DPDP is creating or it's being created for the consumers, and so absolutely, in fact, I think having right DPDP implementation is going to be the major trust differentiator for the banks in the coming years. And customers today are like far more aware, they notice how their data is handled with the kind of awareness campaigns for different security related things the government is spending. Now I'm sure once the DPDP is implemented, government will be doing a lot of awareness related things, and so with that customers will be more aware. So if a bank can clearly communicate that it values privacy or like maybe like seeks consent in the right way, consent, and makes user or makes user feel everything is like offers everything transparently, is how data is used, earns users I'll say trust. But it's similarly how security becomes a differentiator. We in few years privacy is the new trust currency, I'll say, that will be the new differentiator for all the banks. So banks will have to proactively work towards making this implementation of DPDP quite fast, at the same time quite seamless actually.
Superb. I think I like your statement as privacy is the new currency. So
Yeah.
that is very interesting way to look into it. I just wanted to understand from you. You have been collecting so much of intelligence related to the thrust at to the breaches, to the kind of attacks that have been happening globally across the banks and financial institutions, thanks to your antivirus software and your endpoint security and things like that. How have you been as a company trying to mobilize all this or leverage all this along with the AI empowerment that is coming in today to help organization to better their AI standpoint, better their privacy standpoint, and take businesses to the next level?
If you see a lot of efforts and experience since we started our journey with consumers, consumer protection, and we started protecting PCs from the days when internet was yet to start in India. We have seen cyber threats has evolved over these last 3 decades, and every time it is evolving, we realize whatever we have designed is not enough, and we have to redesign things. And how gradually we realize that okay, this is going to be ongoing fight where there is it's not going to be like something that there will be time when we are ahead of threats. Threats will always adapt as we improve. So once we have that in our mind, we realize that we'll have to work in the way where we cannot individually identify each threat and work with the signature and all that. So we started working in the way like how attackers think what is the next step of attacker by keeping all the data that telemetry and collecting all the data which is related to threat. And this data once we started collecting, we started realizing there are machine learning algorithms that will help us correlate, help us cluster things. And as we started doing that, this was almost, I'll say, more than 15 to 18 years back. It's when AI was not a buzzword, but we were using machine learnings and we were using super algorithms of multiple machine learnings to train themselves from the existing data and help us proactively detect what is coming from the monitoring these changes that are happening in the machine. And that really had evolved and matured to the level where now we are handling the number of threats that we are handling is like almost a million new threats every day, and without even human intervention 98% of these percent of these threats are tackled by our AI backend, which we call as godip AI. And that is really helping. And I'm not saying it's like our USP, it's like the similar way most of the antiviruses work, but there is the USP lies is between how you really handle that at the lightning speed. So when I can give you a simple example is, if any of our quick heal user sees something malicious which is completely unknown to the world as well as quick heal, and it has track, say for example 5 or 6 steps, and it realizes this is malicious, from the next moment and all our quick heal users are automatically protected against that, just because everything is connected to cloud and it sends the learning to the cloud, and every quick heal users are automatically protected with those steps automatically being implemented with the form of like cloud updates and cloud lookups actually. So that's where the technology has evolved and matured, which really help us to protect all our users from the threats that before they become a bigger challenge actually.
And what is the roadmap that finally you would like to advise the banks and financial institution in their preparation towards the DPDP today?
The kind of experience that we have with the banks, working with banks, I'll say if we have to achieve the compliance in the deadline of 2 years, they'll have to start approaching a module by module, like cover, for example, one can cover, say, loan department or data aggregation, then, or even CRM systems. And means if they can bifurcate things instead of thinking integrating everything on having a one dashboard and everything at one place, that will take a longer time. Having multiple implementations of DPDP based on what modules they already have, which are it can be classical in the process development modules, these can be separately configured, and then making having multiple DPOs for handling these multiple implementations will help them comply faster. And then gradually as these systems are modernized or newer versions are worked upon, then they can start planning privacy by design and integrating into a single dashboard or something like that currently. So having a larger single dashboard for a complete, a very large bank is going to be a very, very difficult task to achieve in a 2 years time, I'll say.
I know. So it is basically like not don't burn the ocean, but take it piece by piece and do it beautifully, and then integrate it to make it a bigger piece. Wonderful.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much, Sanjay, for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Babu. It was really pleasure having this discussion.